The young man stands at the river's edge, watching water carry debris downstream. His name is Romulus, though nobody knows it yet. The year is 753 before the Common Era, and he holds a bronze knife in one trembling hand. Beside him lies his twin brother, bleeding into the Tiber mud. They had argued about where to build their settlement, about whose vision would shape this place. Now only one vision remains. This moment, brutal and defining, contains everything Rome will become. A city born from violence, a city that will swallow the world. Centuries before Romulus thrust his blade, the Etruscans controlled the Italian peninsula with mysterious authority. Their language remains partially undeciphered even today, but their influence shaped everything around them. To the south, Greek colonists established thriving cities in what became known as Magna Graecia, transforming Sicily and southern Italy into outposts of Hellenic civilization. To the north, the Etruscans themselves commanded respect and resources. Between these powers, on 7 hills overlooking the Tiber River, a small community of Latin-speaking peoples began to gather. They were nobody. They were refugees, outcasts, fugitives. A man could arrive in this settlement with nothing. No family connections, no noble birth, no legitimate claim to respect, and potentially leave as someone. This radical openness would become Rome's greatest strength. The settlement grew slowly, then quickly. It attracted ambitious men and desperate women. It attracted enslaved people who could earn freedom and status impossible elsewhere. The Etruscans taught the developing community much: military organization, religious ceremony, the very alphabet they had adapted from Greek sources. By the time legendary kings ruled, Romulus, Numa Pompilius, Tullus Hostilius, Ancus Marcius, Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius, and finally Tarquinius Superbus, Rome had transformed from a muddy crossroads into something resembling a city. Each king supposedly contributed lasting innovations: a calendar, a sewer system, the great temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill. Then came the scandal that changed everything. In 509, before the Common Era, the son of King Tarquinius Superbus violated a virtuous woman named Lucretia. The assault shattered more than one person's dignity. It shattered the Romans' tolerance for concentrated power. Lucretia's husband and father organized resistance. They drove out the king and declared that Rome would never again submit to a monarch. Instead, they would elect 2 consuls annually, each possessing the power to veto the other's decisions. A senate of 300 men, drawn from the oldest families, would guide state policy. These patricians, the fathers, would govern Rome. Except the plebeians had other ideas. The common people, the non-aristocratic masses, constituted the backbone of Rome's military. Without them, the state could neither defend itself nor expand. They discovered this leverage and used it ruthlessly. When the patricians refused them basic rights, the plebeians threatened to leave entirely, to march away and establish their own city on a neighboring hill. Terrified patricians, suddenly vulnerable, negotiated. Gradually, over 2 centuries of escalating conflict, the plebeians won concessions. They gained the right to marry patricians. They gained access to certain offices. They gained written laws. The 12 Tables, published around 450 before the Common Era, so that justice could no longer be interpreted arbitrarily by aristocratic judges. They gained tribunes, special officials with the power to veto any decision that threatened plebeian interests. This grinding, unglamorous struggle created something unprecedented, a society where birth did not absolutely determine destiny. A wealthy plebeian could eventually achieve political office. A talented man from nowhere could rise. Rome's internal conflicts, rather than destroying the state, actually strengthened it by forcing constant negotiation and compromise. While Rome struggled with itself, it expanded outward. The newly reformed military proved devastatingly effective. Legions were divided into flexible units called maniples, allowing for tactical sophistication that rigid phalanx formations could not match. More importantly, Rome did not simply conquer and extract tribute. It offered defeated peoples something precious, alliance status, which eventually could lead to citizenship. Conquered Italian communities provided not just tax revenue, but also soldiers. Rome's army grew exponentially while its rivals remained static. By 275 before the Common Era, Rome controlled all of Italy south of the Po River. When the Greek city of Tarentum, desperate to resist Roman expansion, hired Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Macedonian general whose military tactics had been learned under Alexander's own relatives, Rome faced its greatest threat yet. But even Pyrrhus, despite his victories, could not defeat Rome's capacity to replace losses and maintain pressure. The Romans absorbed his defeats and kept fighting until Pyrrhus withdrew, exhausted and disgusted. Then Rome looked across the sea and saw Carthage. The Carthaginians, descendants of Phoenician traders, controlled the western Mediterranean. They built their wealth through commerce and naval superiority. When Rome began expanding into Sicily, the two powers collided. What followed were 3 wars spanning over a century, wars that would define both civilizations and ultimately destroy one of them. The First Punic War, named after the Carthaginian term puny, lasted 23 years. Rome, possessing superior land forces, struggled against Carthage's navy until the Romans learned to build warships and fight at sea. When Rome finally won, it gained Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica, its first provinces outside Italy. But Carthage recovered. The Second War proved far more dangerous. Carthage dispatched Hannibal, perhaps history's greatest military strategist, to attack Rome from the west. Hannibal marched an army across Spain, through Gaul, over the Alps into Italy itself, bringing war directly to Roman territory. For 15 years Hannibal won nearly every battle. At Cannae in 216 before the Common Era, he destroyed a Roman army so thoroughly that Rome never again fielded such large forces in a single engagement. Yet Rome, through sheer determination and superior resources, eventually outlasted him. The general who finally defeated Hannibal was Scipio Africanus, who proved that Rome could match Carthage's tactical genius. Carthage survived this war too, though weakened. But Rome's greatest senator, Cato the Elder, could not accept Carthaginian survival. For decades, he ended every speech on any topic with the same phrase, Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. In 49, before the Common Era, Rome launched its third and final war against Carthage. When it ended in 46, Roman soldiers systematically demolished the city. They killed or enslaved the surviving population. They allegedly scattered salt across the ruins to prevent anything from growing there again, though this detail may be historical embellishment. Carthage ceased to exist. That same year, Rome destroyed Corinth, the greatest city of Greece, for daring to resist Roman authority. Greece and Macedonia became Roman provinces. Rome now controlled the Mediterranean world. The influx of wealth, slaves, and cultural artifacts transformed Roman society. The old patrician families, suddenly exposed to Greek philosophy and art, scrambled to educate themselves. They hired Greek tutors, studied rhetoric, memorized Homer. The greatest orator of the age, Cicero, deliberately modeled his speeches on the Greek Demosthenes. But while Romans eagerly absorbed Greek culture, they granted Greek peoples no political rights. Even Italian allies, who had provided soldiers for Rome's armies, remained excluded from citizenship. This injustice exploded in 91 before the Common Era. Italian communities declared war on Rome itself, demanding equal rights. Rome, forced to choose between concession and destruction, chose concession. Citizenship expanded dramatically. Men who had fought as Roman allies suddenly became Roman citizens. This decision, born from military necessity, planted seeds for Rome's future transformation. Citizenship was no longer the exclusive preserve of Roman-born patricians. It could expand further. Meanwhile, Rome's internal conflicts intensified catastrophically. Cheap grain from conquered territories and an endless supply of enslaved labor devastated Italian farmers. Peasants who had once formed Rome's backbone, who had fought its wars and populated its legions, lost their land to wealthy speculators. They fled to the cities, creating an urban underclass with nothing to lose but their chains. The Senate and people, once united, split into hostile factions. The Gracchi brothers, tribunes of the people, attempted reform. They proposed redistributing public land to poor citizens and providing free grain to the urban masses. The Senate, dominated by wealthy landowners, considered these proposals catastrophic threats. Conservative forces murdered both brothers and thousands of their supporters. Rome descended into cycles of violence. A general named Gaius Marius recognized an opportunity. He began recruiting the landless poor into the legions, promising them land grants upon discharge. This created a revolutionary transformation. Soldiers became loyal to their commander personally, not to the state. Legions became private armies. The door to dictatorship had opened. In 60 before the Common Era, two extraordinary generals competed for supreme power. Gnaeus Pompey had conquered the eastern provinces, bringing wealthy territories like Judea under Roman control. He had cleared the Mediterranean of pirates, crushed a slave rebellion led by Spartacus, and earned the title Pompey the Great. His rival was Gaius Julius Caesar, who conquered Gaul, modern France, in a brutal campaign that killed perhaps 1 million people and enslaved another 1 million. By Roman law, returning generals had to disband their armies. Caesar refused. He crossed the Rubicon River, the boundary between Gaul and Italy, with his legions intact. Civil war erupted. Caesar defeated Pompey and his allies in a series of campaigns that took him across the Mediterranean world. He pursued enemies into Egypt, where he encountered Cleopatra, the brilliant Ptolemaic queen. They became lovers. She bore him a son, Caesarion, Little Caesar. Caesar then returned to Rome, gathered every conceivable office into his own hands, and ruled as dictator for life. Rumors spread that Caesar intended to declare himself king. The old Republican families, terrified of monarchy, organized a conspiracy. On the Ides of March in 44 before the Common Era, senators stabbed Caesar to death, including his adopted heir Brutus. The assassins believed they had saved the Republic. They had actually destroyed it. Caesar's will named an unexpected heir, his great-nephew, a young man named Octavius. Octavian, as he became known, entered the struggle for power with few advantages beyond his name. Yet he proved politically and militarily superior to every rival. By 31 before the Common Era, he defeated the last serious competitor, Mark Antony, at the naval battle of Actium. Octavian stood alone as master of the Roman world. He understood something crucial. Romans would never accept an obvious king. Instead, he kept republican institutions intact while concentrating all real power in his own hands. He called himself Augustus, the Revered One, and claimed the modest title of Princeps, first citizen among equals. The Senate continued meeting. Magistrates continued being elected. Everything remained as it had been, except that Augustus controlled everything. For 43 years, Augustus maintained this system. Inside the empire, he brought peace. The Pax Romana Roman peace would last 2 centuries. External borders remained contested, with barbarian tribes constantly probing Roman defenses, but internally stability reigned. Cities flourished. Trade expanded. Population grew. Augustus ordered an enormous artificial lake constructed in the Campus Martius, where 3,000 gladiators fought in simulated naval battles. He limited the height of apartment buildings to prevent the kind of urban chaos that had plagued Republican Rome. He provided free grain to 200,000 citizens. He encouraged poets and artists through his minister Maecenas, who distributed grants to those who would glorify the state. The poet Virgil wrote the Aeneid, which traced Rome's origins back to Trojan refugees and justified Augustus's rule as the fulfillment of destiny. A month was named after Augustus. Temples were erected to him. He received the kind of religious veneration previously reserved for gods like Mars and Jupiter. The cult of the emperor had begun. When Augustus died in 14 of the Common Era, the Senate passed power to his stepson Tiberius. For the first time, imperial power transferred by inheritance rather than election. Tiberius proved suspicious and paranoid. He used laws against treason to eliminate rivals, and the definition of treason expanded to include almost anything: insufficient praise of the emperor, using his image on coins while visiting a brothel, or even careless words. Hundreds died in purges. In distant Judea, a Jewish preacher named Jesus refused to acknowledge the emperor as divine. He was executed by crucifixion, a method Rome reserved for the worst criminals and rebels. After Tiberius came Caligula, remembered as mad, though modern historians debate whether mental illness or simple cruelty better explains his behavior. He allegedly wished to appoint his horse as consul. He was assassinated by the Praetorian Guard, Rome's elite military unit, who then elevated Claudius, a man most had considered too intellectually disabled to rule. Claudius surprised everyone by proving an effective administrator. Claudius married his niece Agrippina, a woman of extraordinary ambition. She poisoned him with mushrooms to elevate her son Nero to the throne. Nero, who considered himself a born artist and actor rather than an emperor, proved disastrous. He murdered his own mother. He executed the apostles Peter and Paul. When a great fire consumed much of Rome in 64 of the Common Era, Nero allegedly played music while the city burned, though historians now doubt this account. He did, however, use the chaos as an opportunity to seize vast territory for a personal palace. He blamed Christians for the fire and initiated the first large-scale persecution of this new religion, which Romans viewed as a dangerous Jewish sect. Nero eventually lost the loyalty of the army. Rather than face execution, he committed suicide, reportedly with difficulty, requiring an assistant's help. After a brief period of chaos, Vespasian, a general of peasant origin, seized power and founded a new dynasty. Vespasian and his son Titus proved far more competent than the previous emperors. When Judea rebelled against Roman rule, Titus besieged Jerusalem, destroyed the Second Temple, and massacred the population. The Western Wall, all that remains of the temple, stands as a monument to this catastrophe. Vespasian, despite his military ruthlessness, possessed a wry sense of humor. He even taxed the urine collected in public latrines, a valuable commodity for textile workers. When someone flattered him for this innovation, he supposedly replied with a phrase that became famous, "Money doesn't stink." Titus, who destroyed Jerusalem, later earned the title "Darling and Delight of the Human Race" after he opened the Colosseum, Rome's greatest amphitheater. The inaugural games lasted 100 days and featured gladiatorial combat, wild animal hunts, and naval battles in an arena deliberately flooded with water. The spectacle demonstrated Rome's power and resources to the entire world. The dynasty that followed, the Antonines, produced what many consider Rome's greatest emperors. Trajan expanded the empire to its maximum territorial extent, conquering Dacia, Mesopotamia, and parts of Arabia. Rome became a city of over 1 million people. Trajan's successor, Hadrian, recognizing that further expansion was impossible to maintain, shifted to defensive strategy. He constructed the famous wall across northern Britain, establishing a clear boundary between Roman civilization and barbarian wilderness. Hadrian was also a passionate Hellenophile who traveled throughout the empire promoting Greek culture. He built the Pantheon, a revolutionary architectural achievement featuring a massive unsupported dome that remains the largest of its kind ever constructed from unreinforced concrete. Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic philosopher who spent much of his reign fighting barbarian invasions on the Danube frontier, wrote his famous meditation, Meditations, a personal philosophical journal that has survived to modern times. In moments between battles, he reflected on duty, mortality, and virtue. He represented the ideal of the philosopher king. But Marcus Aurelius made one fatal mistake. He named his son Commodus as his successor. Commodus preferred the glory of a gladiator to the responsibilities of an emperor. He spent imperial resources on spectacular games and public entertainments while neglecting state affairs. His reign marked the beginning of the end of the Pax Romana. A conspiracy led by his wrestling partner, a slave named Narcissus, resulted in Commodus's assassination by strangulation. What followed was chaos. For the next 100 years, the empire cycled through a succession of emperors, most raised to power by the armies they commanded. A former slave could become emperor. A wealthy merchant could purchase the throne at auction. An African general could rule. A Syrian sun priest could command legions. Military strongmen fought for supremacy, while provinces began to slip away from central control. In 212 of the Common Era, the Emperor Caracalla, himself of mixed African and Syrian heritage, made a decision that echoed Augustus's expansion of citizenship. He granted Roman citizenship to virtually all free inhabitants of the empire, regardless of origin. A person born in Judea or Africa or Britannia could now be a Roman citizen. The idea that Romanness was a legal status rather than an ethnic category, that one could be Roman anywhere in the empire, represented perhaps Rome's most enduring legacy. By the mid-3rd century, the empire faced existential crisis. Germanic tribes pressed the northern borders. The Sassanid Persians attacked the east. Plague ravaged the population. Entire provinces declared independence. Gaul proclaimed its own empire. Economic collapse followed military collapse. Order was restored by Diocletian, a man of humble origin who rose through military ranks to supreme power. Recognizing that the empire had become too large for a single ruler to govern effectively, he divided it into 4 administrative regions, each under a separate ruler called a tetrarch. This system, called the Tetrarchy, moved the empire's center of gravity away from Rome itself. The ancient capital became merely one city among many, no longer the unquestioned heart of the world. After 20 years of rule, Diocletian voluntarily abdicated, retiring to his palace to grow cabbages. The retirement lasted only briefly before his successors began fighting for supreme power. Constantine emerged victorious, and before the decisive battle at the Milvian Bridge in 312 of the Common Era, he allegedly saw a vision of a cross in the sky with the inscription, "In this sign, conquer." Whether the vision was real or propaganda, Constantine's behavior changed dramatically after his victory. Constantine legalized Christianity, granting it the same rights as traditional religions. He built churches alongside temples to Mars and Jupiter. Most dramatically, he founded a new capital city on the Bosporus, calling it Constantinople in his own honor. Rome, the eternal city, was no longer the empire's heart. Constantine's successor Theodosius I made Christianity not merely legal, but mandatory. He began systematically destroying pagan temples. He banned pagan religious practices. He made himself the last emperor to rule a united Roman Empire. After his death, his sons divided it between them, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire, which would endure for another 1,000 years as what we now call Byzantia. The Western Roman Empire, meanwhile, began its long decline. Successive waves of Germanic migrations brought new peoples into Roman territory. These were not invaders in the traditional sense, but refugees seeking safety and opportunity, much like the original Romans had been. Visigoths, Vandals, Ostrogoths, Franks, and others settled within Roman borders, initially as allies, gradually as masters. The last emperor of the Western Roman Empire was a young man named Romulus Augustulus, ironically bearing the name of Rome's legendary founder. When Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed him in 476 of the Common Era, the Western Empire officially ended. The Eastern Empire continued, but the world Rome had created was fundamentally transformed. Yet Rome's legacy persisted in unexpected places. In the center of modern Rome, near the Colosseum and the Forum ruins, stands an obscure tomb. Its occupant was not an emperor or senator, but a baker named Eurysaces. He had been born enslaved, the son of Greek migrants whom Rome had conquered generations earlier. He earned his freedom, won a contract to supply bread to the city, and accumulated enough wealth to commission this monument for himself and his wife. That a former slave could build such a tomb, could achieve such prominence, would have been impossible in most ancient societies. In Egypt, you died as you were born. In Greece, slavery was hereditary. But Rome, founded by refugees and outcasts, allowed for transformation. A man's destiny was not written at birth. The social elevator operated imperfectly but genuinely. This principle, that status could be achieved rather than inherited, that an outsider could become an insider, that the system could accommodate ambition, was perhaps Rome's greatest gift to the world. The empire fell, but this idea survived in the legal systems, the languages, the cities, and the very concept of citizenship that Rome bequeathed to the Western world. In this sense, Rome never truly fell. It transformed, adapted, and persisted, much like the city itself, which rose from 7 muddy hills to encompass the known world, and when its political structures crumbled, left behind something more durable than marble or stone, the belief that human beings could transcend their origins.